Number 10, the Wizard and Trapster. These two would go on to become important founding members of the Frightful Four villain team, but even before that, they were teaming up together. Way back when Trapster was known simply as Pastepot Pete, these two worked together in Strange Tales in an effort to defame and defeat the Human Torch, Johnny Storm. In the end, the Torch escaped their trap and apprehended both of them, turning them in, but still, for two C or D-list villains, they came pretty close to killing the Fantastic Four hero, using Pete's pace and an airtight room that was quickly being drained of its oxygen. Also, I don't know if the Wizard's actually a C-list villain. I might actually bump him up. Also, Pastepot Pete is hard to say if you say it like 3 times fast. Number 9, Crime Syndicate. As much as I love the Crime Syndicate and think that they are an awesome team of villains, they are also pretty dysfunctional, which is why they are ranked so low on our list. However, despite the fact that they are often depicted as being at one another's throats and sneaking behind one another's backs in order to basically make sure that they themselves come out on top with the most power, they still manage to have an impressive amount of horrendous achievements, or almost achievements at least. The Crime Syndicate is still a supervillain team that proves to be extremely dangerous whenever our heroes come up against them, though they would probably be more frightening to face if they could do a little bit better at actually working together like a team instead of constantly double-crossing one another. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and comment below if you want to help us out here at the channel. I promise you it does really help, and we appreciate all your likes and comments. Thank you. Number 8, Daredevil Revenge Squad. Not the official name for this team, I don't think. This team was Typhoid Mary's group of villains. She recruited them to help her get revenge on Daredevil, and they all also had their own motives for doing him harm. All villains who had basically been slighted by the Red Devil themselves in the past. What's more, although this team up only lasted a few issues, it was actually brutally successful, with Typhoid Mary even using her Mary persona at the end of Daredevil issue 259 to kind of ensnare Matt Murdock into like letting his guard down around her. Typhoid Mary recruited the Wild Boys, Ammo, Bullet, and Bushwhacker to help her get the deed done, but insisted on taking the final moment of defeat for herself. Also, is it just me, or does Typhoid Mary look huge in this issue? She looks like so tall. I'm just like, wow, what's happening? I don't hate it. Number 7, Gotham City Sirens. Definitely one of the hottest supervillain team-ups out there in my opinion. Gotham City Sirens isn't just awesome because it's a team of powerful villains, but because it also cemented a fantastic friendship between the 3 main team members that we can always go back to, and I kind of love that. The Gotham City Sirens are Catwoman, Poison Ivy, and Harley Quinn, who sometimes also have other allies who join them in their villainous adventures. And also, let's be honest, heroic adventures, such as the Carpenter, Jenna Duffy, formerly part of the Wonderland gang. While this team up is one made up of criminals, the team of powerhouses also brought a lot of good out in each other and ended up actually performing a lot of heroic missions together despite their villainous pasts. So this might be a team up of villains, but it's also kind of a hero team in a weird way, kind of like doing a little bit of both, which I love. Number 6, Sinister Six. I didn't realize that I made the Sinister Six number 6. I just did that. That was not intentional. I'll take it, but it was not intentional, just so y'all know. While the Sinister Six definitely have their setbacks as a team, there is a reason why they are one of the favorites when it comes to supervillain groups and team-ups. I'm still waiting for them in the MCU. Please, please Marvel, give them to me. With the combined strength and skills of these villains, it seems that no scheme is outside of their reach. In reality though, they usually end up in a competition to prove who is the better, which ends with them betraying one another, usually costing them their victories. But this team has still come close to defeating Spider-Man on multiple occasions, and despite their setbacks, they are a team that you can always rely on to find their way back to one another, even if it means sometimes recruiting some new members to their ranks in the process. Also, I'm all for new members being included to the ranks. There's so many good Spider-Man villains. Why limit ourselves? Give me the Sinister 60. Number 5, Dr. Psycho and Riddler and Parademons. Dr. Psycho ends up allying himself with the Riddler in the Harley Quinn animated series. Originally, it's Harley who wants to team up with Darkseid with her gang, but in the end, she ends up surrendering her army of parademons that Darkseid supplied her with after realizing she's really doing all of this, conquering Earth to try and escape her romantic feelings for Poison Ivy, who is about to get married to Kite Man at this point in the series. Yikes, awkward. Dr. Psycho ends up becoming the big bad of the latest season in the end, with with Riddler becoming his partner in crime and wielding great control over the leftover parademon army on Earth, which he has no qualms about using, unlike Harley, who's like, yeah, maybe I'm going a little too far. But yeah, Psycho's into it. A little too into it. Very much too into it. Number 4, Juggernaut and Black Tom Cassidy. These two aren't just great villains when it comes to their working relationship. They were also like fast friends and kind of best friends. I love it. Black Tom and Juggernaut have been good friends and allies since Black Tom's first full appearance in the comics in Uncanny X-Men issue 101. And I know what you guys are thinking. You're thinking, oh, but Amanda, that wasn't Black Tom's first appearance, but it was his first full appearance. So I believe his first cameo appearance was like issue 99, but don't quote me on that. Only a few issues later, they were already proving themselves to be a deadly duo as they teamed up to successfully kidnap and torment the X-Men in the hopes that this would inspire Professor Xavier to offer his own life up in exchange for his students' freedom. Unfortunately, they ended up getting tricked by Nightcrawler and ultimately were defeated. But still, this was a pretty good attempt to defeat the X-Men and Charles Xavier. Juggy's never gonna get over that. Or well, actually, yeah, he'll probably never get over it. I stand by what I said. Gotta be hard for Juggernaut right now. Like, all of the mutants are off in Krakoa and he's not a mutant. It's challenging. Number 3, Lex Luthor and Brainiac. They were almost a complete success even in their very first team up. Almost. Together, Lex Luthor and Brainiac appeared in issue 167 of Superman, where they teamed up in a 3-part story to take down their joint foe. Their brilliance and technological know-how combined allowed them to both shrink and depower Superman, but unfortunately for them, Superman would not stand by and let himself be so easily defeated, or so like well defeated, because I think that's a pretty good plan. And he found a way to escape their wrath. They honestly should have just squashed him when they had a chance, but hey, then we wouldn't have any more stories. Lex and Brainiac together, in fact, are such a fan favorite. We've even seen them in the most intense kind of team up in the DC animated universe when they merged both their minds and bodies together into one being. Like, you know your partnership is like intense when you're just like, let's just join and be one being, but also terrifying. I don't want to fight. Lex and Brainiac merged together. Number 2, Masters of Evil. Another very iconic and successful group of supervillains who have teamed up together. This roster has also changed dramatically over the years when it comes to their members, and despite the fact that they have some members who are less popular when it comes to their notoriety, this seems to be a team that generally has some measure of success when it comes to their evil plots. The team has consisted of such members as Moonstone, Radioactive Man, Tiger Shark, Titania, and Absorbing Man, with any of the Zemos usually being seen as the most successful leaders of the team to date. But they've also had a lot of different leaders. To date, we've seen multiple incarnations of the team, and we're actually likely in, or at least approaching, the double digits, I think, at this point, when it comes to all the different rosters that we've seen. Number 1, Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn. Yeah, so if you know me, you may have already guessed that they'd be at my top, but yeah, I love Poison Ivy and Harley Quinn. Never mind being, I think, some of the best supervillain team-ups out there. It's just two amazing characters. You give me two amazing villains together, I'm gonna say that it worked well. These two work together in a way that almost allows them to move from the side of villain to hero. In fact, over the last few years, as we've seen their characters develop together, they have both become more and more heroic. Though Ivy is now, of course, kind of headed back in the direction of straight up villain, currently in the comics, after her and Harley's relationship kind of fell apart in the aftermath of Heroes in Crisis. Still, for the most part, these two have brought out a lot of the best in each other, and have also managed to pull off some pretty impressive schemes along the way. I don't know whether making each other better and bringing out the hero in each other means that these two should be considered a great or an awful supervillain team up, but I personally like to see that as a win, even if it doesn't align with the villainous focus of this list. Any partnership where you bring out the best in someone, for good or for evil, should be considered one of the greatest in my books, because, you know, that's what partnerships and or relationships are all about.
Kicking off the list at number 10, Wolverine. Wolverine has had a pretty crazy past, so it's no surprise he's gone down a few dark roads. In the movie Logan, we see two Wolverines battling it out, and it's glorious and it's gory. It's so gory. In Age of Apocalypse, Logan goes from being an X-Men to the Horsemen of Death. It's a great comic. Yeah, Apocalypse actually had Wolverine square up against Sabretooth in order to see who becomes the new Horseman. Wolverine, of course, came out on top, and Apocalypse restored the adamantium to his skeleton. Quite the deal if you ask me. And to make matters worse, Apocalypse replaced Wolverine with a scroll so the X-Men wouldn't notice. So there's a few comics here that could blend nicely into the MCU, like Apocalypse replacing Wolverine with a scroll. This is totally possible, with Ryan Reynolds confirming that the next Deadpool would have included Logan on this road trip. That plus the fact that they're best friends in real life. I mean, Adam Sandler has like 15 of his friends in every movie, so I'm sure they're planning to bring Logan in with Deadpool in that deal in some way, shape, or form. Would it be Apocalypse making him evil? Probably not, but never say never. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give us a thumbs up, that would be so helpful. It helps our channel out quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Tap that thumbs up. Let's keep this video going. Number 9, Pyro. Pyro was once a student at the Xavier School for Gifted Youngsters. And in X-Men 2, we see him hanging out with Iceman and Rogue. He's having a great time just hanging out with some super students. But by the end of the movie, he switches over to Magneto's side, facing off against Bobby. In the comics, St. John Allardyce made his first appearance as Pyro in X-Men 141. He was born and raised in Australia, and his powers, well, as you could probably guess, has something to do with fire. When he was young, he met Mystique, and then he ended up joining her new brotherhood of evil mutants. We need more fire bad guys, plain and simple. We have none in the MCU. I mean, we had some kind of with Spider-Man Far From Home, but that was all just Mysterio being Mysterio. Number 8, Shadow King. Making his first appearance in X-Men 117, the Shadow King is a multiversal manifestation of the dark side of the human consciousness. Spawned, of course, by the first Nightmare. Amal Farouk was the leader of an underground syndicate located in the Thieves' Quarter of Cairo, Egypt. He's a powerful mutant who also happened to be a vessel for said Shadow King. Farouk was able to control everybody around him, and it's pretty terrifying. He feeds on the shadows of your soul. So yeah, with Marvel now veering off to the cosmic side of things, I think we can get a Shadow King behind the scenes secretly just sucking the life out of our world's finest. In the comics before World War II, Amal Farouk worked with Baron von Strucker to try and destabilize Britain's political structure. So maybe this guy's been here the whole time and he's just been lurking in the shadows. We just don't know it yet. I mean, he is the Shadow King. We're not going to really see him. He's here right now. He's been here the whole time. Number 7, Juggernaut. Cain Marko made his first comic book appearance in X-Men issue 12. Cain and Charles Xavier were serving together in the same unit, but when Cain was under fire, he ran off to take cover in a nearby cave. That cave was actually home to the lost temple of Sidorak. So Cain grabbed this glowing ruby from the lap of an idol, read the inscription, and possessed the power of the Crimson Bands of Sidorak, becoming a human Juggernaut. And then an explosion went off and Cain the Juggernaut was trapped under the rubble and Xavier took off. He got out of there. So after Cain dug himself out, he destroyed an entire village with the previous man who had held the Juggernaut mantle, Jin Taiko, getting taken out as well. I mean, we've literally seen him rip Deadpool in half, and if Deadpool's coming to the MCU, I really hope Juggernaut will as well. After all, last time we saw him in Deadpool 2 at the end of the movie, he was crawling out of that pool. He wasn't actually dead. He was just a little bit injured after Colossus laid him out with the help of some well-placed wires. Number 6, STRYFE. Making his debut in New Mutants issue 87, STRYFE was the clone of Nathan Summers, the son of Cyclops and Madeline Pryor, Cable. So we just saw Cable as a new main character slash villain in Deadpool 2, and he was played by Josh Brolin. So I don't think he'll be coming to the MCU. Or at least if he does, they may have to do it with this way, with STRYFE. That way they can bend the original story and use alternate futures however they please, with the character more or less staying true to the comics. He's a clone of Cable from the future. He has this bad armor, he's a telepathic and telekinetic mutant, and Cable, who has devoted his psionic powers to basically ensure that this techno-organic virus doesn't get his right side as well, STRYFE doesn't need to worry about that, so he's OP. He's an OG who is OP. The MCU could for sure use STRYFE. The timelines are getting quite intricate, so it can be explainable, and we'll buy it. If STRYFE comes in, we'll definitely buy it. Number 5, Mr. Sinister. Dr. Nathaniel Essex made his first comic book debut in Uncanny X-Men 221. And he's not that easy to forget once you take one look at him. So in a world where SWORD was taking out Vision and Hydra's doing tests to make mutants in their secret labs, I totally think Mr. Sinister could show up with the X-Men in the MCU. After all, he's obsessed with experimenting on mutants, including himself. He was obsessed with Darwin's theory of evolution, but he felt like they were shackled by too many moral constraints. So that doesn't say anything. You're like, okay, this guy's messed. He couldn't get the funding from the Hellfire Club, or, Kickstarter wasn't around. So he got together a group that he named Marauders, and then he got them to kidnap people off the streets of London so he can experiment on them himself. He even tried to experiment on his son, who wasn't even alive. So yeah, he's a villain who likes to bring the dead back. So hey, we could always use one of those, for sure. Number 4, Dark Phoenix. Jean Grey is an Omega level mutant born with telekinetic and telepathic powers. Seeing the potential in Jean's strength, the Phoenix Force attached itself to her while she was in danger during a space mission with the Fantastic Four. I mean, come on guys, it's X-Men 101. Literally, the issue you can find this in is X-Men 101. I am Phoenix. Boom. Okay, so this dark, powerful cosmic force started to change her for the worse. She ended up destroying a solar system that killed like billions of people. We just finished watching Wanda have the breakdown of a Sentry every Friday for weeks, so we'll gladly watch Jean Grey deal with the Phoenix Force in a similar fashion. Totally. Now, with the fact that Jean Grey wasn't the one to do these evil acts and she was being used as a vessel, rings a bit too close to Wanda's story, but never say never. Number 3, Apocalypse. Making his first steps in Marvel graphic novel issue 17, it's undeniable how intimidating this Omega level mutant is. This guy is loaded with powers. He can suck the energy from you. Apocalypse can suck the energy out of anything and then use that power to shoot energy blasts or use that power to enhance his own strength and speed. Okay, not a bad start. We could definitely use someone like that in the MCU. And just by looking at Apocalypse, you can see that he's merged with celestial technology. His armor is futuristic, it's fun. This technology is wired throughout his body and also his headquarters, making Apocalypse able to teleport at times. Self-molecular manipulation allows for him to alter his physical form. He can get big, he can get small, whatever the case. He's also a super genius, especially when it comes to advanced technology, that stuff that I mentioned earlier. Even before being modified by the celestial ship, Apocalypse was already living for thousands of years. He just goes into a coma and then heals up. I mean, talk about a beauty sleep, damn. In X-Men Age of Apocalypse from 1995, we see just how big and bad this guy can get. Oscar Isaac had a take on him in X-Men Apocalypse and it was great, that was super fun. Not as scary or big as the comics, but still a good time. So if Marvel needs a new big bad guy besides Kang, I think they should go here next. We love superhero teams fighting big bald guys. I mean, we can't get enough of it. Evidently, we'll pay to see it numerous times. Number 2, Scarlet Witch. No more mutants. Scarlet Witch, aka Wanda Maximoff, she's the daughter of Magneto and the twin brother of Quicksilver, aka Ralph Boner, aka Pietro Maximoff. Now, she was on her father's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but at one point she did join the Avengers as well, of course. She's one of Marvel's biggest heroes and she's trending every single Friday for a reason. And then in Marvel's M Day, she kind of became the ultimate evil when she spoke those 3 words, and just like that, a mass amount of mutants were depowered or killed. That large number being 986,618, give or take. Only leaving a couple hundred left on the planet. WandaVision was great because we finally got to see this Scarlet Witch. We saw this villain side to her. And I'd be happy to see more at any time, especially with more mutants now on the way. And number 1, Magneto. Of course, number 1, this is the most ideal scenario. I'd love for this to happen. He made his first appearance in X-Men 1 back in 1963. Magneto is a mutant with the ability to generate and control magnetic fields. He's a master of magnetism. He was a close friend with Professor X, but of course they came to a few disagreements over the idea that humans and mutants could coexist peacefully. And his horrible childhood makes a pretty fair point for said argument. He created the Brotherhood of Mutants and the Acolytes, and he worked with the X-Men before. When Professor X needed to leave Earth, Magneto stepped in to take his place and continued to teach his students how to use their powers. After this, he became a hero in a way, guiding the New Mutants, but again, he's one of those guys that constantly flips back and forth in the comics. And for a while, fans, including myself, were hoping that Magneto was going to be the one behind WandaVision's madness somehow, or he would come in from another universe and then explain to Wanda what's going on and be the bearer of bad news almost. I think Magneto should still be one of the first mutants introduced, especially if they go Ultimate Magneto, because he actually takes out Xavier in those comics, and also thousands of people as well. So there's that. He would be a cool villain to come over, definitely. Kicking off the list at number 10, Sandman. William Baker entered the world of comics in 1963 with Amazing Spider-Man issue 4. He was seen as one of the main villains in Spider-Man 3, and yes, he was at one point an Avenger. Who knew? So when Flint Marko held the mantle of Sandman, he bumped into the Thing, and they had a little heart-to-heart, a little chat about life and how to use your abilities perhaps for, for good. So he started to help Spider-Man a bit here and there, and then in Avengers issue 329, Captain America announced a new Avengers team, and on that roster was the Sandman. He was one of the 7 reserve members. He of course didn't last because, well, he was a reserve member for one, and coming from the villain side already, I'm sure he had one foot out the door anyways. Shame. And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you haven't already, make sure to hit that like button down below because those little thumbs up are great for the page and great for our studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to some Avengers who became villains. Number 9, Sentry. Making his first appearance in Sentry issue 1, of course, Robert Reynolds was a struggling addict who made his way into a laboratory and discovered something called the Golden Sentry Serum. So of course he consumed it, and then he got the surprise of a lifetime when he was then given the power of 1,000,000 exploding suns. That's a lot of power. That plus a homemade costume equals a brand new superhero. Robert fought alongside the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, then the New Avengers. Things changed for Robert when Norman Osborn decided to put together a little team of his own, the Dark Avengers. So Sentry was also once a Horseman of Death, serving alongside Banshee, Grim Reaper, and Daken. He even considered himself as the heir to Apocalypse at one point, so definitely not an Avenger anymore, for sure. Number 8, Namor. King Namor is of course Marvel's version of Aquaman. He's the king of the seas, and he's also not a fan of metahumans, surprisingly. He mostly would go head to head with Black Panther and Wakanda. He wasn't a fan of Wakanda. He often attacked it quite a bit. He was asked to join the Avengers back in 1963 in Avengers issue 16, but he declined. Too cool for school. We get it. Alright, cool. He did join for a brief amount of time though, but when the Avengers vs. X-Men happened, he stood with the X-Men and he fought Luke Cage and the Thing. What a traitor. I mean, he's not the worst, but if you're not with the Avengers, you're clearly against them. Especially after you've helped them out for a bit and then you change your mind? Come on, dude. Number 7. The Incredible Hulk. So Thor Ragnarok was loosely based off the Planet Hulk storyline. I say loosely because, well, the comics, that story didn't end up going so well, obviously. Because on Sakaar, the rocket that he arrived in ended up blowing to smithereens, causing some casualties that left the Hulk a little heartbroken, to say the least. So he rolls his shoulders back a few times, and then he heads back to Earth, and thus begins the World War Hulk storyline. He just destroys everybody. It's so scary. I mean, all the heroes that Earth has come to love just in the path of this death train. Like, he locks the Illuminati in Madison Square Garden and then makes them fight to the death. It's like Madison Square Up Garden. I mean, once you spend enough time on Sakaar, I guess it becomes second nature. I don't know. The whole story is a bloody good mess. It's great seeing the panic on the Avengers' faces the entire time because they know that they're screwed, and that's what makes it real and scary. Number 6, Sabretooth. Victor Creed made his debut in Iron Fist issue 14, and he's been known as one of Wolverine's biggest rivals. But during the Avengers X-Men Axis storyline, the Red Skull stole the brain of Charles Xavier, and he planned to wipe out all of mutant kind. And then in book 2, we see the inversion, where good goes bad and bad goes good. Interesting time, because Doctor Doom and Scarlet Witch cast a spell, so now Sabretooth was on the good side. So after the dust settled, Iron Man made it so that Sabretooth wouldn't flip back, so Sabretooth joined the Avengers Unity Division. This didn't last forever, and recently in House of X issue 6, Sabretooth faced trial among the Quiet Council, and let's just say he ended up swallowed by Krakoa below the surface, where he's trapped in a state of permanent stasis for the rest of his life. How comfortable. I mean, he kind of made it easy for them too. He clearly didn't fight for his case. Number 5, Hawkeye. In the MCU, Hawkeye's had it pretty rough. I mean, by the time Avengers Endgame rolled out, Clint had lost his entire family, and then 5 years after Thanos snapped his fingers, we catch up with him in Tokyo, and he's not the same guy that we once knew. Now he's taken heads and he's taken names. We get our first look at Ronan. Now, I know that Natasha meets up with him and they have a beautiful moment, and then he rejoins the team. He even volunteers to test the time travel tech himself. But if we look back at Avengers 1, Hawkeye is a villain for like most of that movie. He turns evil before the opening title even pops up on screen. He's the guy who took down the helicarrier. He almost killed everybody on that boat. Now, I know Loki had a scepter and that caused it, so if we look at Avengers 1 and Avengers Endgame, I think it's safe to meet in the middle and say that the MCU Hawkeye has been somewhat of a Avenger who turned into a villain, at least for a bit. Number 4, Quicksilver. Pietro Maximoff is the twin brother of Wanda Maximoff, and in Avengers West Coast issue 57 back in 1965, he joined the team. Pietro has been trouble for the team for a long time. I mean, he convinced Wanda to do what she did in House of M. He's framed the Avengers for treason, and he has no problem using pieces of Terrigen to give his daughter Luna special abilities, even though he knows he shouldn't do that. Also, that whole thing with Layla Miller after House of M, where he saved her life just so he can be the one to take her out, believing that she was responsible for the House of M event. Yeah, it's safe to say he went from Avenger to villain. Like, those are just 3 out of many, many things. In West Coast Avengers 33, Magneto's bloodline got the best of him, and he got fellow Avengers captured by the communist gang. Fastest guy ever, but makes the most mistakes. I don't understand. Number 3, the Vision. Making his glorious debut in Avengers issue 57, the Vision is a synthezoid, and in the comics, he was created by Ultron using parts of the original Human Torch and the mind of Wonder Man. Just bam, smack together. He turned on his original creator, Phineas Horton, and he joined the Avengers. Nice. And then in the MCU, he's created as Ultron's new body, but with the addition of the Mind Stone and a little bit of Jarvis, we have an android Avenger. Also nice. But during the Secret Empire storyline, Vision was part of Hydra's Avengers when they were taking over the world, all from an AI virus. Gotta get that firewall installed, my friend. Arnim Zola was the one to blame for that. So who knows, maybe now with the White Vision being free in the MCU and pretty much reborn, his firewall probably isn't the best either. Also, it's confusing because it appears that Vision gets all of his memories back, but then he flies away and then he's not to be seen for the rest of the show. So clearly something's up here. I'm betting the MCU does him dirty. Maybe they reprogram him to make him evil or something. Or he might become Ultron. That was a big theory for WandaVision. We'll see. Number 2, Captain America. There are a couple lines from Steve Rogers that fans will remember that took place in the MCU, like Avengers Assemble, that is America's ass, but the line Hail Hydra was followed by a roar of applause on opening night of Endgame. Why? Because not only does he use his post-Avengers knowledge to obtain the scepter, which in that of itself is already pretty sweet, but because the audience expects another cool elevator fight and Steve outsmarts us. But the line Hail Hydra comes right from the comics, and a bit of a darker scenario. The last words of Captain America Steve Rogers were that of Hail Hydra, and fans were not happy. This was huge news. People were pretty upset. Readers were sending in death threats. Like, could you imagine? The 2017 series Secret Empire concluded that bad Captain America was a double, and that the good guy was locked in the cosmic cube. Okay, solid save, but those images of evil Steve will live in our heads rent-free, so thank you for that. And finally, number 1, Scarlet Witch. Of course, I'm saving her for last, of course. She's the daughter of Magneto and the twin brother of Quicksilver, aka Pietro Maximoff. Now, she was on her father's Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, but at one point she did of course join the Avengers as well. She's one of the biggest Marvel characters ever, and during the events of M-Day, she spoke those 3 words, no more mutants, and just like that, a mass amount of mutants were depowered or wiped out. That large number being 986,618, only leaving a couple hundred left. That's crazy. That's like Thanos level destruction almost. And then in the MCU as well, we just watched Wanda become a villain over a 9-week period. She had a mental breakdown similar to M-Day, and she trapped Westview in her hex. Now, of course, she frees everybody and things look pretty back to normal, kind of, by the end of the show. But with that after credit scene of her studying the Darkhold, and with the given knowledge that Wanda is in the next Doctor Strange movie, she's for sure going to become a villain. Even for a little bit, she'll be a villain, for sure. I can't wait to see what else she does. She looked like she was studying up pretty fast while she was sipping tea on her doorstep, so I don't know. Her mind's crazy. She can do anything she wants.
Number 10, Electro. Electro, even in his first appearance in issue 9 of the original Amazing Spider-Man series, was beating Spider-Man. At least, initially. When Spider-Man first meets Electro, he doesn't know what to do, and Electro gets away a few times before Spider-Man manages to stop him. At one point, Spider-Man even reaches out to try and grab Electro. Not a great idea. While Electro is in his electric shock condition, his words, not mine, it turns out touching him is deadly. Spider-Man survives the great electric shock he is given, but is forced to modify his costume in order to take on Electro in the future. He adds on rubber slippers and gloves, and likely in the future would make modifications to his costume, adding in rubber insulation in case he came up against the villain again, which he would many times. Because yeah, that's only issue 9. It goes on for a lot longer than issue 9. Number 9, Mephisto. Mephisto might not win in the most obvious ways, but he definitely is always sneakily on the up and up when it comes to him versus heroes. Any heroes really, Spider-Man included. In the case of Mephisto versus Spider-Man, that sounded more legal than I intended, but I guess we are dealing with binding contracts. Mephisto ended up helping Peter to get what he needed, but at a price. He required in exchange Peter's marriage to MJ, which for comic book continuity meant undoing that rocky but ongoing union. Spider-Man got what he wanted. Aunt May was safe and his identity was a secret once more, but I don't think he really realized what he was giving up until he experienced it. MJ didn't even seem to recall their marriage, although lately it seems to be implied that she might have known more about their past than she's let on. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you love it when I talk about villains, I love talking about villains, then be sure to show that love by giving this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out here. I'm not just saying that. They don't just pay me to say that, this is the truth. Number 8, Chameleon. In his first appearance, Chameleon left Spider-Man running away in tears, ruining the day he ever became Spider-Man. Chameleon may have been apprehended in the end of issue number 1 of Amazing Spider-Man, but somehow it still felt as though he came out on top. Dang it, because Chameleon, you know, he's a villain, so he shouldn't win. Although I am kind of rooting for him sometimes. During their conflict, Chameleon attempted to make it seem as though Spider-Man was up to no good, impersonating him while committing acts of thievery and fleeing from the police. Oh no! Even once Spider-Man managed to catch him, it still seemed as though Chameleon might get away. Fortunately, Spider-Man had his spider sense to let him know something was up. He managed to get away from Chameleon, but it was only because Chameleon's disguise had become damaged in the fray that the villain was caught at all. So Spider-Man didn't even really win that day. It was more just like Chameleon made a mistake. And was like, dang it. Now it's revealed who I am because you can see the Spider-Man suit underneath and I was impersonating Spider-Man. How embarrassing. Number 7, Morlun. Not only has Morlun proven himself to be a formidable foe in various storylines, with him taking on all of the Spider-Verse twice in the Spider-Verse event and Spider-Geddon in the comics, in addition to taking out multiple Spider-Folks / Spider-Totems along the way, but he also went toe-to-toe with Spider-Man in the other. The worst thing / I guess best thing for Morlun fans about this story is how Morlun doesn't just ever go for the like 1-2 knockout. Morlun seems to prefer drawing out his victory, teasing his victim if you will, and enjoying Spider-Man's suffering. It's probably because Morlun's used to winning so much, he's used to devouring Spider-Totems, so he's like, we'll just let this play out. At one point, Morlun devours Spider-Man's eye in a fight and beats him to within an inch of his life. However, while this definitely feels like a victorious moment for Morlun and Spider-Man was beat here, he would eventually recover, meaning that Morlun didn't get a straight victory over Spider-Man. In fact, he'd even like heal his eye back. But of course, villainous victories rarely ever get to be permanent, so I think we still need to count this one. Number 6, the Lizard. While Lizard doesn't do anything crazy like succeed in completely killing Spider-Man or anything like that, he does beat him in the race against time to save his friend, Dr. Curt Connors, who, you know, is also the Lizard. In the story Shed, the Lizard ends up taking over before Spider-Man can get there to try and stop it. Spider-Man arrives far too late as the Lizard seems to have permanently gained dominance after devouring Curt Connors' son against his own will. This victory would be one that would not only haunt Spider-Man but the Doctor as well. He would end up finding a way to cure himself of his lizard brain but become stuck in his lizard form, kept in a containment cell for his crimes, but unable to bring himself to reveal Spider-Man that he had finally cured himself mentally of his reptilian half. This whole thing is just like a super big Lizard win in my mind, because even when Connors frees himself of the Lizard, he's still stuck in the lizard form, and he still is like, I feel too guilty to even be able to tell people what's really going on. So the Lizard like really won, even though he was gone. Number 5, Mysterio. Mysterio recently got a pretty big win in the MCU, in typical Mysterio style, I must say. While he hasn't been doing too hot in the comics lately, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, in Spider-Man Far From Home, Mysterio managed to earn Spider-Man's trust and even infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D., making them believe he was a hero from an alternate world. I'm not going to lie, even I personally wanted to believe it. It turned out this was not true, and while his backstory was a little different here, Mysterio here was still a master at illusion and a full-on villain. In the end, Quentin Beck would seemingly die during a confrontation with Spider-Man, but it turns out he had one more trick up his sleeve. And at the end of the film, we see a video recording of Beck that incriminates Spider-Man and also reveals his true identity as Peter Parker. He's gonna be in a lot of trouble in the next movie, I think. Number 4, KRAVEN. KRAVEN's Last Hunt is a story that forever sticks out in comic book history. Especially in Spider-Man's history, it is a dark tale where KRAVEN finally captures his most prized prey, Spider-Man. What's more, it's also implied he kills Spidey. He then proceeds to take Spider-Man's place, proving once and for all that not only is he capable of capturing and killing the hero, but also aiming to prove that he's better than Spider-Man by beating down all his villains brutally. In the end, we learn that Spider-Man was not actually dead, but in a comatose, death-like state all this while. He returns and KRAVEN acknowledges that while he seemingly won to do what Spider-Man does while keeping to his moral code is actually an impressive feat. Something that KRAVEN likely wouldn't actually be able to do. His final hunt complete, it's then implied that KRAVEN takes his own life. Number 3, KINGPIN. There are a few times that KINGPIN has beaten Spider-Man throughout the comics and alternate universes that we have explored. At one point, he actually manages to kill MJ in a what-if version of Back in Black, and while Spider-Man manages to hunt him down and even kills him, in the end, KINGPIN's actions turn Spider-Man into a villain. So I'd still consider that a win for KINGPIN. But what I'd really like to focus on here is the time that KINGPIN managed to kill Spider-Man in Sony's groundbreaking animated film Into the Spider-Verse, one of my favorite films of all time. Here, KINGPIN manages to actually kill Peter Parker, the current Spider-Man of Miles Morales' universe. Although Miles would also learn of alternate universes with their own Spider-Men, Spider-Girls, and even Spider-Pigs. He would also learn of his newfound powers and himself have to protect the city as a new Spider-Man. But still, when it came to the Peter Parker of his reality, KINGPIN killed him. He dead. He dead. So dead. Never coming back. Number 2, Dr. Octopus. Doc Ock actually succeeds in taking Spider-Man's place, not just by impersonating him, but by actually swapping bodies with the hero. That the two swap bodies, wah 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 wah, with Peter ending up stuck in the dying form of Doc Ock and Doc Ock's mind now within the young and superpowered body of Spider-Man. Oh my goodness. Eventually, he would relinquish this form, giving it back to Peter when he realized he was incapable of making the tough decisions required of a more heroic spirit. But for a time, we'd come to know this version of villain and hero combined as Superior Spider-Man. And if you're wondering, but wait a minute, didn't Peter die in Doc Ock's body? Yes, but also his consciousness lived still on in his mind. It's a little confusing, but if you read it, it makes sense. It's like comic book confusing, just if you're explaining it quickly to someone in a list. Number 1, Green Goblin. You can take Peter's body, you can take his mind, you can ruin his reputation, but one of the worst things you can ever do to him is to break his heart. There are many ghosts that haunt Peter Parker, but one of the most meaningful ones to this day remains that of Gwen Stacy. Gwen was Peter's childhood sweetheart. Before he and MJ were together and were a thing, he was with Gwen, who was also a science enthusiast and academic like Peter. Gwen ended up being taken hostage by the Green Goblin and thrown from a bridge. When Peter as Spider-Man went to save her with his web shooters, it's implied that his own attempt to do so was what killed her. The tension from his web caused her neck to snap. Norman Osborn has remained one of Spider-Man's most iconic villains to this day, and for many, the moment Green Goblin killed Gwen Stacy was where this shift really happened for his character, making him Spider-Man's greatest and most feared nemesis.